Okay, so continuing with this analysis, I was saying that John had sort of retracted into this very emotional state where we're not using facts anymore. We're not using evidence. We're just talking about where we're just delving into areas where John is just upset. And he's just kind of, I think he's really starting to get going. If they don't reel him in, he's going to get going.
I just want to ask you to, I'm going to ask the court reporter to mark this plaintiff.
When like this, I think that's a sign of nervousness and being unsettled. When he leaned up, did that. And because we know that Judy or Judith Phillips kind of said, he was elusive and he was very quiet. And so this is no longer the quiet John that we're dealing with.
Plaintiff's Exhibit 18, I believe that's 19. And I'll show that to Mr. Ramsey. And Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you if the document I've just shown you, which is marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 19 for, what's the incantation for identification, is substantially correct in its reporting with respect to its headline.
No, it is not.
Okay. In what respects is it incorrect?
We did not turn to the work of a psychic. A picture was forwarded to us that was done by a Dorothy Allison, who I believe is a psychic, by someone. I think she'd done it on a television program. We forwarded it to our investigators as a matter of procedure. We did that with everything we got in the mail, and we got a lot of stuff. And I believe they chose to put it on their website to stir up activity. And they did receive a number of leads and calls based on that.
Were those leads and calls useful to your investigation?
I don't know.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you, unfortunately, for some reason, I ran out without making a second copy, so I'm going to ask the reporter to mark this as Plaintiff's Exhibit number 20 for identification, and then I'll just show it to you after he's marked it.
Okay.
Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you if you can identify what appears in that document.
I can identify most of the pictures of JonBenet. One of them is very fuzzy, but I just assume that's the picture that was on the website.
Do you know if that is in fact a picture of your website that you're looking at?
I don't know that for a fact, no. I've not seen this image.
Do you know if the image of the man who's at the lower part of it, do you know if that image ever appeared on your website?
This is the first I've seen it. I don't usually look at that website.
Do you know if the man in question in that photo was in fact a suspect to your personal knowledge?
I don't know.
Was that man meant to be Chris Wolf?
Not to my knowledge.
Just so the record's clear, that's the drawing of the psyche that you were earlier referring to.
Is it? I don't know. I was asking
yeah.
Mr. Ramsey what he
and
did or
that-
didn't know.
Well, just so that the record is not confused here, Mr. Ramsey indicated to you that the psychic's drawing was sent to the Ramseys, that it was reviewed by the Ramsey investigators,
Okay.
and that the investigators put it up on the website. I think he said their website. This website was utilized by the Ramsey investigators.
All right.
Oh.
I just asked Mr. Ramsey if he could identify it, if he'd ever seen those pictures, and whatever else. That's all I just
Well,
want to know.
that's a different question that I was asked. Have I ever
see.
seen this drawing? Yes, I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what in context it
That was it appears to be as best I can tell from the copy.
Was that man meant to be Chris Wolf?
Not to my knowledge.
Just so the record's clear, that's the drawing of the psyche that you were earlier referring to.
Is it? I don't know. I was asking
yeah.
Mr. Ramsey what he
and
did or
that-
didn't know.
Well, just so that the record is not confused here, Mr. Ramsey indicated to you that the psychic's drawing was sent to the Ramseys, that it was reviewed by the Ramsey investigators, and that the investigators put it up on the website. I think he said their website. This website was utilized by the Ramsey investigators.
All right. I just asked Mr. Ramsey if he could identify it, if he'd ever seen those pictures, and whatever else. That's all I just
Well,
want to know.
that's a different question that I was asked. Have I ever
see.
seen this drawing? Yes, I have.
You have?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what in context it
That was it appears to be as best I can tell from the copy, the drawing that was sent to us, that was made by Dorothy Allison.
Have you ever seen a picture of Chris Wolf?
Yes.
In your opinion, does Chris Wolf look anything like the picture there?
I wouldn't draw that conclusion, no.
Okay. Now, I have one last question. Just simply, it's...
Because I think Mr. Hoffman was very clear on what he asked him. He was extremely clear on what he asked him. Do you recognize this picture? Do you recognize this to be JonBenet? You recognize this? And John made it seem like he just got it in the mail and just passed the mail on to his investigators, and his investigators put it up on a website that the investigators created. I'm still not sure about that, or if what Mr. Hoffman is trying to get at is the Ramseys have a website, and this picture was put up on the Ramsey website, but it seems like John and Lynn are pushing back and saying, well, no, the investigators have their own website that this was put up on.
a point that involves something I just want to be clear about. And I'm going to let you read this. It's and the reason I'm not reading it out loud is that it's part of the Boulder police interview, which has been marked confidential. I don't want to have something read into the record that would in any way mean we suddenly have to mark this confidential if for some reason we don't want to have today's deposition marked confidential. So for the purposes of this question, I'm just going to ask you to read to yourself the highlighted portions. And in fact, I'm not going to even attach this as an exhibit. I'm just going to simply use this as a recollection refreshed. If you look at that, I'm just going to ask you one question with respect to it. And Mr. Lynn, it's at the very end. It regards I think the butler door or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me just say this to you.
Yeah.
This is a couple of pages from, it looks like Patsy Ramsey's April
Yeah, the front, I put
97
the
interview,
cover.
6-hour interview.
Mhm.
I don't have any problems. You can read it. You can put it in the
I
record.
would just prefer.
I don't have any
Okay.
problems with that being made part of the record officially. Put it out
Okay.
there. We'd like to see
No,
the whole
I would
police
ju-
investigative file made public.
I
so
would.
people would know
all
the
right.
truth about this case.
I would prefer, since this has been stamped confidential.
I'm the one that stamped it confidential in other litigation several months ago, if not last year, for reasons different than the issue of confidentiality. In this case, I am waiving any claim to confidentiality. Put that into the record. I have no problems
Right.
with you doing so.
Well,
So Lynn just said, we want people to know the truth of the case. We just had a conversation just a little bit ago that John was upset at the Boulder police for releasing things to the media. And here we are within the same interview talking about the people and letting the people know what's going on. So it didn't even take you to get outside of this interview to criticize the police for something that you're wanting to do now.
I'm not
Did
for.
you put the whole April 1997 transcript of both of their interviews into the record? I have no problems with you doing so.
I'm not going to do that.
I have no problems
All
with
right,
it.
thank you
Let
very
the truth
much.
come out.
I agree with you. This question involves the. You know where the Butler kitchen was?
Well,
In your house in
yes,
Boulder?
I know what we call the Butler
Kitchen.
Mhm.
Do you remember opening the door to the Butler kitchen at any time in the morning while you were looking through the house for JonBenet?
No,
And so, is it that you have no memory of it, or that you just didn't do it?
I did not open it.
So it wasn't opened by you.
No.
Thank you very much. This is going to conclude my deposition of Mr. Ramsey, and I want to thank Mr. Ramsey for being here. I want to thank Mrs. Ramsey once again for her deposition yesterday and for being here today, and thank counsel.
All right, just so the record is clear, we have a number of hours under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure remaining in which you have the right to examine Mr. Ramsey and to ask him any question factually or otherwise that is proper and relevant to the claims and defenses in the lawsuit. And you acknowledge that there's a number
Yes.
of hours remaining.
Absolutely.
He's answered every question today.
Yes, he has.
Well,
And
I think with the exception of what we spoke about regarding the financial issues, which we may take up.
We're going to take that up on the record,
that was
right?
all.
That's
that was
something
all.
that would
No.
require we
Every
create a court
question
ruling.
that was put to Mr. Ramsey today, that was a matter of record today, that we agreed on as a matter of record, was in fact answered by Mr. Ramsey.
And as you've indicated, you've reviewed his April 1997, June 1998, and April 2000 police
That's
interviews.
correct.
And I think you'll say, with respect to Mr. Ramsey, Mr. Hoffman, the same thing he said with respect to Mrs. Ramsey yesterday. He answered every question for the police, didn't he?
That I can't make a subjective statement about, simply because I don't know what it was the police were trying to elicit in the way of answers, so I can't say that.
Can't say that he gave them the answers they wanted.
No, I just don't know. It's really probably improper
Well,
for me
maybe.
to characterize their testimony. I mean, and I don't think anybody will want a testimonial from me from the Ramsey family
Yeah,
anyway.
but the point is,
But I did receive those.
You've had that mass of what amounts to about 70 hours of their interviews with police that they voluntarily gave. And my question is, all of that material had been forwarded to you earlier by the Ramseys, along with a number of other documents.
All
Are you sure you have no other questions of Mr. Ramsey? Because if you do, I want you to ask him
No, I
today.
understand. In fact, one of the reasons why, and I want to characterize this properly, is one of the reasons why these depositions are shorter than they might have been is because I am not asking either Mr. or Mrs. Ramsey to go over testimony that they.
You know what's weird is that Lynn Wood always seems to make a problem after the deposition is over. He always seemed to try to push this narrative of, oh, you don't want to ask any more questions, right? No, I'm done. I explained to you before. I came here prepared. These are the questions that I asked. I'm done. Then he wants to start barking, and not only barking, but just like barking very loudly and at length about what? Like, just what conversation are we having right now? This is the wrong time to be barking. You should have been barking earlier with facts and evidence when we were talking about the actual facts of the case, not necessarily how much time that you have or that I have to talk to John. Like, let it go. It's done.
Already given by the police. The police certainly spent a great deal of time with the Ramseys, and quite frankly, even though there may be areas that I might have personal curiosity about, I feel it would be inappropriate for me to ask them, and so that is why these depositions aren't going the full day. It is not because I feel that the Ramseys don't have anything to offer. It's just simply that I think that they offered a great deal of information when they were in fact interviewed, and I just chose not to cover most of it, and that's all.
But you acknowledge that any question you have, curiosity or otherwise, that you believe to be relevant and properly frame this case, you have the opportunity to ask now.
I have had the opportunity to ask Mr. Ramsey questions today, and with the stipulated exception that we have, which does not affect my answer here, I felt that Mr. Ramsey made the best effort that he could to answer those questions fully.
Let me briefly cover a couple of matters with you, Mr. Ramsey, by way of direct or redirect discovery. Let me hand you what has been marked for purposes of identification as Plaintiff's Exhibit number 16 to the deposition, and I think has been represented to you and acknowledged by you. It appears to be we don't know how many generations away from the original, but a copy of the ransom note found in your...
Lynn, we've already talked about the ransom note. That ransom note was 20, 30, 40 minutes ago. Like, I'm closing the deposition. Why are you talking about the ransom note now? Like, the time to talk about the ransom note was 40 minutes ago.
Your home on December 26, 1996. You've looked at that earlier today. At the time earlier in your testimony with Mr. Hoffman, I think you made reference to one of the peculiarities of the ransom note being that you were first discussed or addressed formally and then later in the note informally. Do you remember telling Mr. Hoffman about that? And I think you made the reference that you were addressed Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. Do you recall telling him that? Did you have the ransom note in front of you at the time you were giving that information to Mr. Hoffman?
I'd forgotten that it was only addressed to me, but it was what I noticed was that it was a formal address, and yet they fell into a familiar form later on.
That's all I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
And now let me mark.
I bet you did, because it was noted that you did say that.
This is Defendant's Exhibit number 1. You want to take a look at this real quick?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. May I make one observation about this before you read it into the record? I'd like the record to reflect that I made this document available on the internet at the time that Sina Wong, and there's a document which seems to be almost identical, David Liebman received this. I'd just like the record to reflect that I made no attempt to keep this hidden from the public.
And there has been no representation that you did make any such attempt?
Just
I'm sorry, no, but I'm
No,
that's like the record to reflect that
But I appreciate the
I
stipulation.
made that available to the
Stipulation was that you recognized the document,
Yes.
and it is actually the very material that you placed on the internet.
That's correct.
And it was in fact, and is in fact, a true and correct statement of the letter that was sent to Sina Wong by Michael Kane on behalf of Alex Hunter, the Boulder
Correct.
District Attorney, January 20, 1999.
Yes.
And also a true and correct verbatim statement of the letter sent by Mr. Kane on that date, January 20, 1999, to Mr. David Liebman. Am
That's
I right?
correct.
All right. So that the record is clear. In those letters, which predate the filing of this lawsuit, Mr. Kane stated to Ms. Wong and Mr. Liebman, in identical language, that he was informing them that their request to testify before the Boulder County Grand Jury in the JonBenet Ramsey murder investigation was denied, And the statement was, we have determined that your proposed testimony would not serve the interest of justice, which is the controlling standard by which to judge your request. And I continue to quote, the primary reason that we have reached this decision is that we believe that the methodology which you have used in reaching your conclusions does not meet the standards employed by the vast majority of forensic questioned document examiners in this country. I continue to quote, most significant is your complete failure to account for or even reference any unexplained dissimilarities between the questioned and known samples. To Sinawong by Michael Cain on behalf of Alex Hunter, the Boulder District Attorney, January 20, 1999.
Yes.
And also a true and correct verbatim statement of the letter sent by Mr. Cain on that date, January 20, 1999, to Mr. David Liebman. Am
That's
I right?
correct.
All right. So that the record is clear. In those letters, which predate the filing of this lawsuit, Mr. Cain stated to Ms. Wong and Mr. Liebman, in identical language, that he was informing them that their request to testify before the Boulder County Grand Jury in the JonBenet Ramsey murder investigation was denied. And the statement was, we have determined that your proposed testimony would not serve the interest of justice, which is the controlling standard by which to judge your request. And I continue to quote, the primary reason that we have reached this decision is that we believe that the methodology which you have used in reaching your conclusions does not meet the standards employed by the vast majority of forensic questioned document examiners in this country. I continue to quote, most significant is your complete failure to account for or even reference any unexplained dissimilarities between the questioned and known samples. You are willing to conclude with 100% certainty that a writing was authored by a particular person based on some threshold level of similarities without any mention that there may be 10, 100, or 10,000 unexplainable dissimilarities between the known and unknown writings. I know of no reputable forensic document examiner who will not agree that unexplained dissimilarities between a person's natural writing and questioned handwriting will preclude a positive identification. In fact, where the degree of unexplained dissimilarity is high, it may result in elimination, in spite of the existence of a number of points of similarity. And then I go down to state, in addition to your technical deficiencies, I quote, there are other reasons for our decision. I would note that you have engaged in a campaign of promoting your opinion in a manner that would surely open your credibility to doubt on cross-examination in a judicial proceeding. As an experienced trial attorney, I believe that an expert witness who has attempted to insinuate herself or himself into a particular criminal investigation through a public media campaign would appear less than objective and professional to a jury. End quote.
Right.
Now, I make that statement because I misspoke earlier when I made a statement about a letter sent by Michael Cain to you. In fact, the letters were sent by Michael Cain directly to Sena Wong and to David Liebman in January of 1999. You received copies of those letters before this lawsuit was filed. You published those letters on the internet. And I simply make this record because I now know there can be no dispute about what Michael Cain said about your alleged experts and your
also
knowledge. Hold on.
about how they became available to the public.
I don't think there's any dispute about what Michael Cain has said about their methodology and their credibility. That's why this is important to be put into the record, since you have referred to them earlier today. And I do that not only to clarify the record, but also to point out that this is another one of the reasons that we filed what is now correctly identified by me as the 15th defense, Darnay. I had earlier said the 13th defense. That instead of bringing this legal action out of a concern for some...
Michael Cain was the assistant DA, I think, with the special prosecutor that was getting paid on this case to do a deep dive on this case. At the time, he was working under Alex Hunter, who was the DA, the official DA. And so he's apparently writing to these two, and I think he was feel like he was fairly young at this point. He had secured some convictions on other high-profile cases. Interestingly enough, the case that he secured a conviction in, they had never found the murder weapon, but they secured a conviction, which is interesting because can't find the murder weapon in this case either, but can't secure the conviction. But anyways, his point is that he mentions to Sena Wong and I think the other expert that the only basis for which, and this is bull crap, the only basis for which he can't include their testimony in the grand jury on a professional account is because they don't mention the dissimilarities between Patsy's handwriting and the ransom note. Again, this is coming out of the district attorney's office at the time. Number one. Number two, they mention it only about Patsy's handwriting from what Linwood is reading. They did mention that John's handwriting was dissimilar, largely dissimilar. Why didn't he go after that? Why didn't he say, hey, you failed to mention maybe some similarities and dissimilarities between John and John's handwriting and the ransom note? Like, it should be, if we're doing that, it should be fair across the board. It should be for John and anybody else who has, written a sample. But to point out and say, well, for Patsy, you didn't give us any dissimilarities. Well, in that case, you would reject it and just say, hey, are you able to do an analysis and just give us some dissimilarities as well? Maybe just, did you have an opportunity to jot down any dissimilarities that you saw? Just so we can make an unbiased judgment. And you send that back to them and give them a chance to list out any dissimilarities for their professional opinion. But then to go on and say that, the dissimilarities, if they outweigh the similarities, then we'll take the dissimilarities. I'm going to go out and say that almost sounds extremely biased and prohibitive to the investigation in its truest form, because it almost seems like you're looking for dissimilarities now. That's the problem that I'm having. And that's a little bit biased. And then to go on and say, well, outside of the technical skill, and that was only one thing that can be argued against. That's like one thing that we can argue against, or that can be corrected. But then he goes on to say that you went out and you touted your claims in the media. I'm sorry, so what? So what? I will say to the media what I want to say to you. This is the analysis that I've done, whether I present it to the media or not. Like, we on freedom of speech or not?
Real injury to reputation. Plaintiff Wolf and his counsel bring this lawsuit as a publicity stunt. They have thus joined legions of persons who have tried to make personal profit from the brutal murder of defendant's child. Neither Plaintiff Wolf nor his counsel possesses any admissible evidence that any defendant murdered JonBenet Ramsey. That is verbatim the 15th defense. There was some question in the litigation raised earlier in the deposition about whether that had been made in the pleadings. It is a defense to this case, asserted in the 15th defense in our answer. With those clarifications to the record, I have nothing further.
Right. I would just only like to point out one thing with respect to Mr. Kane's objection. The operative word there is unexplained dissimilarities. And the fact is that Mr. Liebman and Ms. Wong felt that these dissimilarities were explained by the fact that the person in question, in their opinion, was trying to disguise their handwriting. And in disguising your handwriting, occasionally you're going to create dissimilarities which are not unexplained. They're dissimilarities, but they're not unexplained dissimilarities. And that's the point I'd like to make with that. And thank you.
Appreciate your statements about what they say. We look forward to having the opportunity, as I'm sure you will tell us, to ourselves cross-examine Ms. Wong, Mr. Liebman, Mr. Lacey, Mr. Miller, if he's going to be involved, as well as Mr. Epstein and Mr. Ziegler. We
All
look
right.
forward to that day
Thank
where
you
we
very
can
much.
answer them the questions and get the answers
All
from
right.
them. Thank
And
you.
again, Mr. and Mrs.
Deposition
Ramsey, thank you
concluded.
for being here
We've
today
had our
and yesterday.
differences, but we're all children of
Yes.
God. And I
Thank you very much.
respect
All right.
Call for the record at 3:03.
Thank you very much.
And we will.
That was weird and biased. But we'll jump on this next interview, come back so we can partition what we're doing here. So stick around. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you feel in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. And until next video, take it easy.